The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Claire Bennett had ever stood in. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in curved rows that circled the speaking platform. Some had fur, some had scales, some were just clouds of glowing gas held together by energy fields. All of them were watching her. Claire took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was calm and steady, though her heart was beating fast. She had practiced this speech 100 times. For 300 years, humans had worked with the Galactic Council. They had built things, fixed things, solved problems that no one else could solve. When the giant relay stations that allowed fast travel between stars stopped working, humans fixed them. When two alien species started fighting over a planet, humans helped them make peace. When a plague swept through the outer colonies, human doctors found a cure and shared it freely with everyone. Humans had built the hyperspace relay network that connected thousands of worlds. Before humans arrived, it took years to travel between distant stars. Now it took days. Human engineers had designed every relay station. Human technicians kept them running smoothly. The Council had been grateful at first. They had given humans medals and awards. They had called humanity their greatest allies. But over time, something changed. The Council stopped saying thank you. They started expecting help instead of asking for it. They began to treat human assistance as something they deserved, not something freely given. 3 years ago, humanity had asked for one thing in return for all their work. Earth's population was growing. They needed room to expand. They asked the Council for permission to settle on one empty planet in the Outer Rim, just one world that nobody else wanted. The Council had said no. They debated for 6 months and then voted against it. They said humans already had Earth. That should be enough. 2 years ago, human cargo ships were attacked by space pirates in the frontier zone. 15 ships were destroyed. 300 humans died. Earth asked the Council to send military ships to patrol the area and stop the attacks. The Council debated for 8 months. They formed committees. They wrote reports. They discussed the legal implications. In the end, they voted to do nothing. They said it was not their responsibility. Last year, humanity proposed new trade agreements. The agreements would help smaller alien species who were struggling economically. It would create jobs and opportunities for worlds that the big, powerful species usually ignored. The Council voted down every proposal. The founding members, the species who had started the Council and held the most power, did not want competition. They liked things the way they were. 6 months ago, Claire had stood in this same spot and given a warning. She had told the Council that humans were tired, that they felt used and disrespected. That partnership required mutual respect, not one side doing all the work while the other side took credit. The Council representatives had looked at each other and laughed. Some of them literally laughed out loud. They thought Claire was bluffing. They thought humans would never actually leave because humans needed the Council just as much as the Council needed humans. They were wrong. Now Claire stood before them again. This time she was not giving a warning. She was saying goodbye. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. We will honor all existing contracts with individual species who wish to maintain relations. We will defend our own territory and our own interests. We will no longer answer your calls for help. We will not maintain your infrastructure. We will not subsidize your economies. You wanted to stand on your own. Now you will have that chance. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted at each other in dozens of different languages. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some looked genuinely worried. Council Prime Zethrix rose from his seat. He was the leader of the Council, a massive insectoid creature whose species had founded the Alliance 4,000 years ago. His hard shell gleamed under the chamber lights. His mandibles clicked together in a sound that his species used for laughter. You think you can simply leave? Zethrix's voice boomed through the translation system that turned his clicks and chirps into words everyone could understand. You think you can walk away from the greatest alliance in galactic history? You need us more than we need you. You always have. Claire looked at him for a long moment. She felt sad more than angry. They still did not understand. Even now, at the very end, they could not see what was about to happen. I suppose we will see, she said quietly. Goodbye, Council. I genuinely wish you well. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. No one tried to stop her. No one called her back. They thought she would change her mind. They thought this was a negotiating tactic, a way to get better terms. They thought humans were bluffing. They would learn the truth soon enough. Claire walked out of the chamber and down the long corridor to the docking bay where her shuttle waited. Her assistant, a young man named Jake Morton, stood by the ramp. He looked nervous. "Is it done?" he asked. "It's done," Claire said. "Send the signal." Jake pulled out a small device and pressed a button. The signal went out instantly, traveling through the relay network at faster-than-light speed. It reached every human facility, every human ship, every human diplomat in Council space. The message was simple: come home. Within 1 hour, human engineers began shutting down their workstations and packing their tools. Within 6 hours, human diplomats were canceling meetings and booking passage back to Earth. Within 24 hours, human military vessels were leaving their patrol routes and setting course for the Sol system. Within 48 hours, there were no humans left in Council space. They left behind everything they had built. The relay station still worked for now. The medical facility still had power. The defense grids were still online. Humans had even left detailed instruction manuals explaining how everything worked, but they had taken something irreplaceable with them. They had taken their knowledge, their creativity, their willingness to solve problems that seemed impossible. They had taken the spark that had held the Council together for 3 centuries, and they had left behind silence. In the Council chamber, Zethrix looked at the empty space where Claire had stood. For the first time in his long life, he felt a cold knot of doubt forming in his stomach. Around him, other representatives were starting to ask questions. "What do we do now?" someone asked. Zethrix drew himself up to his full height. "We continue as we always have," he declared. "We are the Galactic Council. We have existed for 4,000 years. We will not collapse because one species decided to throw a tantrum. We have engineers of our own. We have scientists and diplomats. We do not need the humans." But even as he spoke, Zethrix wondered if he was telling the truth. Deep down, in a place he did not want to examine too closely, he suspected that they had just made a terrible mistake. The humans had departed quietly, without drama or threats. They had simply packed up and left. Soon the Council would learn what that truly meant. Part 2. The First Cracks 3. Weeks after humanity's departure, the Nexus 7 hyperspace relay failed. The relay was one of the oldest in the network, responsible for connecting the dense core worlds of the Council to the agricultural rim colonies. Without it, travel times increased from days to months. Trade ships that normally made weekly runs were forced to take circuitous routes through secondary relays, burning fuel and time. Chief Engineer Voxtal of the Draxian Technical Guild stood before the massive structure, his 4 eyes scanning the diagnostic readouts with growing concern. He had been trained by human engineers 15 years ago, but that training had focused on maintenance, not deep system repairs. "The quantum synchronization matrix is destabilizing," he reported to his team. "We need to recalibrate the harmonic resonators before the entire relay collapses." His assistant, a young Draxian named Kelix, pulled up the technical manual humans had left behind. The document was thousands of pages long, written in precise technical language that had been translated into 73 languages. But translation could only go so far. The concepts themselves were built on human mathematical frameworks that other species had never fully internalized. The manual says we need to adjust the phase variance to match the local gravitational constant. "But I don't understand the calculation method they're describing," Kellic said, frustration evident in his voice. Voxtal tried for 3 days. He followed every instruction, checked every connection, ran every diagnostic. The relay continued to deteriorate. On the 4th day, the Nexus 7 relay went completely offline. 17 star systems were suddenly cut off from the primary trade routes. Food shipments bound for industrial worlds were stranded. Medical supplies urgently needed on frontier colonies sat in warehouses light years away. The economic impact was immediate and severe. The Council convened an emergency session. "We need to contact the humans," said Representative Kiran of Tau Ceti, her crystalline form pulsing with anxious light. "They built these systems. They can fix them." Council Prime Zethrix bristled. "Absolutely not. We will not go crawling back to them after 3 weeks. We have thousands of skilled engineers across Tijojin. 3 weeks had passed since the humans left. At first, nothing seemed to change. The relay stations kept working. Ships continued to travel between stars. Trade continued. Life went on. Then the Nexus 7 relay started having problems. Chief Engineer Voxtel received the first warning signal at 3 in the morning, station time. He was a Draxian, a species with 4 eyes and 6 fingers on each hand. His people were known for being good with machines. Voxtel had worked on relay stations for 20 years. He had even trained with human engineers back when humans were still part of the council. He rushed to the control center and pulled up the diagnostic screens. What he saw made his blood run cold. The relay station was one of the oldest and most important in the network. It connected the dense core worlds where most of the council's founding species lived to the agricultural rim colonies that grew food for billions. Without this relay, travel time between the core and the rim would increase from 3 days to 4 months. "What's the problem?" asked his assistant, a younger Draxian named Kelix. "The quantum synchronization matrix is destabilizing," Voxtal said, pointing at the red warning symbols flashing on the screen. "If we don't fix it soon, the whole relay will shut down." Kelix pulled up the technical manual that humans had left behind. It was huge, thousands and thousands of pages. The humans had translated it into 73 different languages, but some things got lost in translation. The concepts were built on human mathematics and human ways of thinking about physics. Other species could understand the basics, but the deep technical details were harder to grasp. "The manual says we need to adjust the phase variance to match the local gravitational constant," Kelix read aloud. "But I don't understand how to do the calculation." Voxtal tried to remember what the human engineers had taught him. He had watched them perform this exact repair twice before. But watching someone do something and doing it yourself were very different things. The humans had made it look easy. They would joke and chat while their hands flew over the controls, making tiny adjustments that kept everything running perfectly. For 3 days, Voxtal and his team worked without sleeping. They followed every instruction in the manual. They checked every connection. They ran every diagnostic test. They did everything exactly as the manual said to do it. The relay continued to get worse. On the 4th day, the Nexus 7 relay went completely offline. One moment it was there, a glowing point of light that ships could use to jump instantly across light years of space. The next moment it was gone, just dead metal and dark screens floating in the void. 17 star systems were suddenly cut off from the main trade routes. Cargo ships carrying food to industrial worlds could not deliver their goods. Medical supplies meant for frontier colonies were stuck in warehouses. Passenger ships carrying thousands of travelers had to find alternate routes that would take months instead of days. The economic impact was immediate. Stock markets crashed on a dozen worlds. Food prices doubled, then tripled. People who had never worried about where their next meal came from suddenly faced empty stores and rationing. The council convened an emergency session. The representatives gathered in the Great Chamber, but now it felt different. There was an empty space where the human delegation used to sit. That empty space seemed to draw everyone's attention, like a missing tooth that your tongue keeps finding. Representative Kieran spoke first. She was from Tau Ceti, a crystalline being who looked like a walking sculpture made of colored glass. Her people communicated by changing colors and pulsing with light. The translation system turned her light patterns into words. "We need to contact the humans," she said. Her colors shifted to show anxiety and worry. "They built these relay stations. They know how to fix them. We need their help." Council Prime Zethrix's mandibles clacked together sharply. The sound conveyed anger and frustration. "Absolutely not. We will not crawl back to them after only 3 weeks. That would show weakness. We have thousands of skilled engineers across the council. We will solve this problem ourselves." "But the manual," Kieran began. "The manual is sufficient," Zethrix interrupted. "We simply need to study it more carefully. Our engineers are intelligent and capable. They will figure it out." The council voted to allocate more resources to the repair effort. They sent the best engineers from 7 different species to work on the problem. They gave them unlimited funding and told them to fix the relay as quickly as possible. But weeks passed, and the relay remained offline. The engineers could not figure out what was wrong. Every time they thought they had found the solution, something else would break. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces looked the same. Then more relays started having problems. The humans had maintained the entire network regularly. They replaced parts before they failed. They ran optimization programs that kept everything working at peak efficiency. They caught small problems before they became big problems. Without humans, the network began to decay. One by one, relay stations started showing warning signs. Some could be stabilized with emergency repairs, but they did not work as well as before. Ships took longer to travel between systems. The delay was only a few hours at first, but it added up quickly when you had to make multiple jumps. 5 months after the humans left, the relay network was operating at 40% of its original capacity. What used to take 3 days now took a week. What used to take a week now took a month. The entire galaxy seemed to be slowing down. The economic consequences were severe. Companies that depended on fast shipping went bankrupt. Colonies that imported most of their food faced shortages. Some worlds had riots when food prices became too high for ordinary people to afford. But the relay network was not the only problem. Human engineers had built and maintained thousands of other systems throughout Council space. Medical diagnostic machines stopped working. Water purification plants broke down. Climate control systems failed. Every day brought a new crisis. The Council's own engineers tried to keep up with the repairs, but there were simply too many problems. And without the deep technical knowledge that humans possessed, many repairs were temporary at best. Things would work for a while, then break again. The Council began to realize how much work the humans had been doing. All those human technicians and engineers who had seemed to be everywhere, always tinkering with something, always running maintenance checks, had been holding everything together. Their absence was like pulling out the support beams of a building. For a while, nothing seemed to change. Then everything started to collapse. In the Council chamber, the debates grew more heated. Some representatives wanted to contact Earth immediately and apologize. Others insisted that would be humiliating. They argued that the Council just needed more time, more resources, more effort. But deep down, everyone was starting to understand the same thing. The humans had not been servants or subordinates. They had been the glue holding galactic civilization together. And now they were gone. Voxtal stood in front of the dead Nexus 7 relay station looking at his failure. He was a good engineer. His team was made up of good engineers. They had tried their best, but their best had not been good enough. He thought about the human engineers he had trained with years ago. He remembered a woman named Kate who could diagnose a relay problem just by listening to the sound it made. He remembered a man named Greg who could rewrite code in his head and recite the fixed version from memory. They had made everything seem so easy, so simple. Only now did Voxtal understand how skilled they had really been. And only now, when it was too late, did he understand what the Council had lost. 6 months after humanity's departure, something far worse than failing relay stations began to happen. The Kraloks came. The Kraloks were a predatory species from the southern edge of the galaxy. They stood 3 meters tall with thick armor-like skin and 4 powerful arms. Their society was built around conquest and war. They respected only strength and saw kindness as weakness. For 300 years, the Kraloks had stayed within their own territory. Not because they were peaceful, not because they were satisfied with what they had, but because they feared the humans. The Kraloks had studied human history carefully. They had learned about Earth's wars, about how humans fought when threatened. They had seen what happened to species who attacked human allies. The humans never lost a war. They were tactically brilliant, willing to take casualties that other species found unthinkable, and possessed a terrifying capacity for escalation. There was a famous incident 70 years ago. A Kraloks raiding party had attacked a small human mining colony, thinking it would be an easy target. The humans had responded by tracking the raiders back to their home base and destroying it completely. Then they had sent a message to the Kraloks leadership, a simple message that every Kraloks still remembered. Touch our people again and we will show you what war really means. The Kraloks had believed them. They had stayed quiet ever since, but now the humans were gone. The Council had no unified military force. Each species maintained its own defense fleet, but without human peacekeepers to coordinate them, they were just scattered ships with no central command. The Kraloks began testing the borders. Small raids at first, probing attacks on isolated outposts to see how the Council would respond. When the response was slow and disorganized, the raids grew bolder. Governor Leah of Haven Colony stood at her office window and watched the sky turn dark. Ships were descending through the atmosphere, dozens of them, their hulls painted with the red and black colors of the Kralox war fleet. Haven was a peaceful agricultural world. The Lumini people who lived there were gentle herbivores who stood only 1 meter tall. They had long ago given up any weapons or military. Why would they need them? The humans had protected them. The humans had always protected them. Leah had sent 7 emergency requests to the council, begging for military assistance. The council had promised to send help. They had said a defense fleet was being assembled. They had said it would arrive soon. The fleet had not arrived. Leah suspected it would never arrive. The first Kralox bombardment struck the capital city. Leah watched buildings explode and collapse. She watched the parks where children played become craters filled with fire. She watched her peaceful world die. The Kralox ground troops landed within hours. They moved through the cities with brutal efficiency, killing anyone who resisted and capturing the rest. The Lumini had no weapons, no training, no hope. 3 million Lumini died in the first week. Another 2 million were taken as slaves to work in Kralox mines and factories. The rest fled into the forests and mountains, hiding wherever they could. The news spread across council space faster than any relay signal. If Haven could fall, any world could fall. Species that had disarmed under humanity's protection realized their mistake. They scrambled to rebuild military forces they had not needed in generations. But building ships and training soldiers took time. Time they did not have. The Kralox were not the only ones taking advantage of the situation. Other aggressive species saw the council's weakness and launched their own campaigns of expansion. Old territorial disputes that humans had mediated decades ago flared up into open warfare. Borders that had been stable for centuries suddenly became war zones. In the council chamber, representatives shouted at each other in panic. The united front they had once presented was crumbling. Species blamed each other for the crisis. Some accused others of not contributing enough to defense. Some withdrew from the council entirely to focus on protecting their own worlds. Council. Prime Zethrix tried to maintain order, but his authority was slipping. More and more representatives openly questioned his leadership. They pointed out that he had been the loudest voice against contacting Earth. They reminded everyone that he had laughed when Claire Bennett warned them this would happen. Representative Kieran stood to speak. Her crystalline body glowed red with anger and frustration. We must contact Earth now. Not tomorrow. Not next week now. Our people are dying. Our worlds are being conquered. We need help, and there is only one place we can get it. And what do you think the humans will say? Demanded Zethrix. Do you think they will just forgive and forget? Do you think they will come running to save us after we laughed in their face? I think we have to try, Kieran said. Because the alternative is to watch civilization collapse around us. The debate raged for hours. In the end, the council agreed to send a message to Earth. But they spent days arguing about the exact wording. They did not want to sound too desperate. They did not want to admit they had been completely wrong. They wanted to maintain some dignity, some pride. Finally, they composed a message that expressed concern about the deteriorating security situation in council space. They suggested that perhaps it would be beneficial for all parties to open a dialogue about possible cooperation. They carefully avoided any direct apology or admission of fault. The message was sent through the fastest remaining relay route. It would take 3 weeks to reach Earth, traveling through systems where relay stations still functioned properly. The response came back in 2 days. That should have been impossible. The only way a message could return that fast would be if the humans had anticipated the Council's call and positioned ships near Council space, ready to respond immediately. Which meant the humans had been expecting this. They had been waiting for the Council to break. The message was short. It contained only 3 words, "We told you." Zethrix stared at the message on his screen. Those 3 words felt like a slap across his face. They contained no anger, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. Just a simple statement of fact the humans had told them. Claire Bennett had warned them 6 months ago exactly what would happen. The relay network would fail without maintenance. Defense would collapse without coordination. Aggressive species would see weakness and attack. Everything that was happening now she had predicted, and the Council had laughed. Kieran approached Zethrix after the message was read to the full Council. "We need to try again," she said. "Send another message." This time include an actual apology. An apology will not be enough, Zethric said quietly. He felt old suddenly, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Even if they forgive us, why would they help? What could we possibly offer them that would make them want to return? I don't know, Kieran admitted, but we have to find something. Because if we don't, the Galactic Council will cease to exist within a year. She was right. Zethric could see the trajectory clearly now. More relay stations would fail, cutting systems off entirely. More worlds would be conquered. More species would withdraw from the Council to fend for themselves. The great alliance that had stood for 4,000 years was falling apart, and it was his fault. He had been so sure the humans were bluffing, so confident that they needed the Council as much as the Council needed them. He had been wrong about everything. On Haven Colony, in a cave hidden deep in the forest, Governor Leah huddled with the survivors of her people. They had no food except what they could forage. They had no shelter except the rocks above their heads. They had no hope except the desperate prayer that someone, somewhere, would come to save them. But no one came. The humans who would have moved heaven and earth to protect them were gone, and the council that had promised to help them was nowhere to be found. Leah thought about Claire Bennett's warning, the speech that had been broadcast across all council worlds 6 months ago. She thought about how her own government had dismissed it, how they had said humans were being dramatic, that nothing would really change. She thought about all of this while she tried to comfort a child whose parents had been killed in the bombardment. And she understood finally what the humans had known all along. Some lessons can only be learned through suffering. 1 year had passed since the humans left. The Galactic Council was dying. The relay network was operating at 18% capacity. Most of the galaxy was now isolated, cut off from the network entirely. Individual systems became islands, in a vast ocean of space, unable to trade, unable to communicate, unable to call for help. The economies of entire civilizations had collapsed. Worlds that had imported 90% of their food now faced starvation. Billions of beings went hungry. Some worlds descended into chaos as governments failed and society broke down. Disease spread unchecked. Human medical technology had been so advanced that other species had stopped developing their own. Now that the human-made diagnostic machines were breaking down, doctors could not identify illnesses until it was too late. Plagues that could have been easily cured a year ago now killed millions. The Kraloks had conquered 15 council worlds. Other aggressive species had claimed another 20. The border wars that humans had once mediated with patience and diplomacy now raged across dozens of systems. More beings died every day in fighting that served no purpose except to satisfy old grudges. In the council chamber, less than half the seats were occupied. Many species had formally withdrawn from the council. Others had simply stopped sending representatives. A few had ceased to exist entirely, their worlds conquered or their populations scattered as refugees. The representatives who remained sat in stunned silence as the latest reports came in. Another relay failure in the Deneb sector. Another colony lost to raiders in the frontier zone. Another million refugees with nowhere to go. Representative Kieran stood to speak. Her crystalline body had lost its shine. She looked dull and gray like a light slowly going out. "We are out of options," she said. "We must go to Earth, not to send a message. We must go in person. We must apologize face to face. We must beg if that is what it takes." For once, no one argued with her. Even Council Prime Zethric remained silent. His pride, which had seemed so important a year ago, now felt like a joke. What good was pride when your civilization was collapsing around you? "I will go," Zethric said finally. The words came hard, like pulling teeth. "I will lead the delegation to Earth. I will apologize. I will ask for help." The council voted unanimously to send a delegation. They had nothing left to lose. The journey to Earth took 2 months. What would have been a 3-day trip, when the relay network functioned properly, now required dozens of jumps through failing stations and long stretches of slower-than-light travel. The delegation had time to think about what they would say, time to rehearse their apologies, time to wonder if the humans would even listen. They arrived in the Sol system to find it transformed. The orbital infrastructure around Earth had expanded dramatically. Where there had been one orbital station, now there were 5. Shipyards floated in rings around the planet, building vessels at a pace that seemed impossible. The asteroid belt had been heavily mined, turned into a resource operation on a scale the Council had never seen. But what really shocked the delegation were the ships. Dozens of new warships patrolled the system in perfect formation. These were not the peacekeeping vessels humanity had operated during their time with the Council. Those had been strong but designed primarily for defense and deterrence. These new ships were something else entirely. They were sleek and deadly, covered in weapons, built for one purpose only: war. The delegation's shuttle was met by Admiral Peter Grant, commander of Earth's home fleet. He was a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He wore a dark uniform covered in medals and ribbons. His expression as he greeted them was polite but distant, like a host greeting uninvited guests. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "The President is expecting you." They flew down to the surface in silence. The shuttle landed in Geneva, at the same complex where the Galactic Council had first made contact with humanity 400 years ago. The building looked the same, but everything else felt different. President Lisa Morgan met them in a conference room. She was a woman in her 50s with short brown hair and a calm, measuring gaze. She sat at the head of the table with her advisors around her. Admiral Grant stood behind her, arms crossed. Secretary of State Paul Harris sat to her left, studying the delegation carefully. Director of Engineering Karen Lopez was on her right, her expression unreadable. Council Prime Zethrix sat across from them. His mandibles clicked nervously, a gesture he could not control. Representative Kieran sat beside him, her colors muted and subdued. The other delegates, representatives from 8 other council species, sat in silence. "President Morgan," Zethrix began. His voice came through the translation device, but it sounded weak and uncertain. "We come before you in humility. We were wrong. We took your contributions for granted. We dismissed your warnings. And now our people are suffering the consequences of our pride and our foolishness." He went on to detail everything that had happened. The failing relay network, the economic collapse, the wars and conquests, the deaths of billions, the collapse of civilization across large parts of the galaxy. He held nothing back. There was no point in trying to minimize the disaster. When he finished, President Morgan sat in silence for a long moment. Her face gave away nothing. Admiral Grant's expression remained cold and hard. Secretary Harris took notes on a tablet. Director Lopez looked almost sad. "Ambassador Bennett told you this would happen," President Morgan said finally. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge like a knife. "She explained exactly what you were losing. You laughed at her." "We did," Zethrix admitted. "We were fools. You called us servants. You implied we were obligated to help you, that we had no right to refuse. We were wrong about everything." President Morgan leaned forward. "Do you understand why we left Council Prime? Not because we were angry, though we were. Not because we wanted revenge, though I will admit that watching you struggle has provided a certain satisfaction. We left because you needed to learn a lesson that words alone could never teach." She gestured to a screen on the wall. Images appeared showing the failing relay network, the conquered worlds, the suffering populations. "This is the cost of taking people for granted, of viewing cooperation as servitude, of mistaking patience for weakness. Every human who died protecting your worlds, every innovation we shared freely, every conflict we resolved was a gift. Not a payment, not an obligation, a gift." Zethrix bowed his head, a gesture of submission that no Council Prime had made in 1,000 years. "We understand now. We are here to ask humbly if there is any path forward, if there is anything we can offer that might persuade humanity to help us again." President Morgan looked at her advisors. Admiral Grant shook his head slightly, his opinion clear. Secretary Harris looked thoughtful. Director Lopez nodded, a small gesture that seemed to mean yes. The president was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally, she spoke. "There might be a way, but it will not be a return to how things were. The relationship would need to be fundamentally different. We will not be your servants. We will not be taken for granted again. If we help you rebuild, it will be as equals, as partners, with proper compensation and proper respect. Do you understand? Yes, Zethric said, immediately. Whatever terms you require, we will meet them. I hope that is true, President Morgan said. Because our terms will not be easy. They will require fundamental changes to how the Council operates, changes that will be difficult for many of your species to accept. We will accept them, Kieran said, speaking for the first time. Her colors pulsed with desperate hope. We have no choice. Without your help, the Council will cease to exist within another year. Our people will die by the billions. Whatever. You ask however hard your terms, they cannot be worse than what we face now. President Morgan nodded slowly. Then let us begin negotiations. I warn you now, this will take time. Months, perhaps. And we will not rush. We will do this properly, with clear agreements that protect both our interests and yours. We have time, Zethric said, though he was not sure if that was true. We will stay as long as necessary. As the first session of negotiations began, Zethric felt something he had not felt in a year. A small, fragile thing that he was almost afraid to acknowledge. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to save what remained of galactic civilization. But the price would be high, and he had no doubt that humanity would make sure they paid it in full. The negotiations took 3 months. 3 long, difficult months where every word was debated, every term examined from every angle, every agreement written and rewritten until both sides were satisfied. The humans were not cruel, but they were firm. They knew their value now. They knew what would happen if they simply returned to the old arrangement. So they made sure the new agreements protected their interests while also giving the Council a chance to survive. The terms were harsh, but fair. The Galactic Council would be restructured from top to bottom. Earth would hold a permanent seat with veto power over any Council decision that affected human interests. No longer would humanity be bound by decisions they had no say in making. Human engineers would return to repair and maintain the relay network, but they would be paid market rates for their work. Real money, not just medals and honorary titles. And the contracts would be clear. If the Council failed to pay, or if they started taking human work for granted again, the contracts could be terminated immediately. Human peacekeeping forces would resume operations, but only in defense of species who signed individual mutual defense treaties with Earth. Those treaties required something important. The species being protected had to maintain their own military forces and contribute to collective defense. No more would humanity fight alone while other species disarmed completely and depended on human protection. Most significantly, humanity would be granted colonization rights to any unclaimed worlds they wished to settle. They would not need Council approval. They would not need permission from anyone. If a planet was empty and Earth wanted it, Earth could have it. This was the price for 300 years of being denied room to grow. When the final agreement was presented to the remaining Council members, there was outrage from some quarters. The founding species, those who had held power for 4,000 years, complained that the terms were too favorable to humanity. They said Earth was taking advantage of the situation. They said it was humiliating to give so much power to a species that had only been in space for 500 years. Council Prime Zethric listened to all the complaints. Then he stood and spoke in a voice that carried through the chamber. We can accept these terms, or we can refuse them and continue on our current path. If we refuse, the relay network will continue to fail. More worlds will be conquered. More billions will die. The Council will collapse completely within a year. Is that preferable to accepting terms that treat humanity as an equal rather than a servant? The chamber fell silent. When the vote was called, the terms were accepted by a large majority. Those who voted against were mostly representatives of species whose worlds were still relatively safe, who had not yet faced the full consequences of humanity's absence. The treaty was signed on a spring day in Geneva. Admiral Claire Bennett came out of retirement to witness the ceremony. She had not expected to live to see this day. She stood in the observation gallery, watching as President Morgan and Council Prime Zethric placed their marks on the agreement. After the ceremony, Zethrix found Claire standing alone, looking out at the mountains in the distance. He approached slowly, uncertain if she would want to speak with him. "Ambassador Bennett," he said, using her old title. "May I have a moment of your time?" Claire turned to face him. Her hair was grayer than it had been a year ago, but her eyes were still sharp and clear. "Of course, Council Prime. You were right," Zethrix said simply. "About everything. I wanted you to know that I understand that now." "I take no pleasure in being right," Claire said, and she meant it. "I wish you had listened before so many had to suffer." "I know. That is what makes you dangerous," Zethrix said. "We thought your kindness was weakness. We thought your patience meant you would tolerate anything. We were wrong about everything." "Not everything," Claire corrected gently. "You were right that we needed each other. You were just wrong about the nature of that need. You thought you were hiring workers. You were actually making friends. And you treated friends like servants." Zethrix was silent for a moment, his mandibles clicking softly. "My people have a saying. The predator never appreciates the prey until the hunt becomes difficult. We never appreciated what you were doing because it looked so easy. Only when it was gone did we understand its true value." Claire nodded slowly. "Then maybe something good has come from this after all. If both our peoples remember this lesson, maybe the next 3 centuries will be better than the last." "I hope so, Ambassador. I truly hope so." Within a week of the treaty signing, the first human relief ships departed for Council space. They carried engineers to repair the relay network, doctors to fight the plagues, and food for worlds facing starvation. But they also carried something else. They carried a message that spread quickly through the remains of the Council. The humans were not coming back as servants. They were coming back as equals. And that changed everything. The reconstruction took years. Human engineers worked alongside engineers from other species, teaching them the deep technical knowledge needed to maintain the systems properly. Human doctors trained local medical staff instead of just treating patients and leaving. Human military officers helped other species build proper defense forces instead of just fighting their battles for them. It was slower than if humans had just done everything themselves. But it was better this way. This time, when humans eventually stepped back, the systems would continue to function. The knowledge would remain. The Council would be able to stand on its own. The Kraloks were the first to test the new arrangement. 6 months after the treaty was signed, they attacked another Council world, expecting the same easy conquest they had achieved on Haven. They found something different waiting for them. Human warships arrived within hours, coordinating with local defense forces that had been trained and equipped according to the new mutual defense treaties. The battle was short and brutal. The Kraloks lost 2/3 of their attack fleet and retreated in disarray. The message was clear. The humans were back, and they were done being patient with aggressors. The Kraloks' leadership received a communication from Admiral Grant. It was similar to the message humanity had sent 70 years ago, but with a new addition. "We gave you a chance to change your ways. You chose war instead. Now you will learn what happens when you push humans too far. We will not destroy your species, but we will ensure you never threaten anyone again." Human forces, working with Council military units, systematically dismantled Kraloks' military infrastructure. They liberated conquered worlds. They freed slaves. And they established permanent monitoring stations in Kralok space to ensure compliance with the peace terms. The Kraloks, who respected only strength, finally understood what they were dealing with. The humans were not just strong. They were strong enough to be merciful. And somehow that was more frightening than any show of pure force. 5 years after the treaty, the Galactic Council held a ceremony on a rebuilt Haven colony. The world had recovered slowly. Its cities rebuilt, its people returned from hiding. Governor Leah stood beside Claire Bennett as they unveiled a monument to those who had died during the Kraloks' invasion. "Thank you for coming back," Leah said softly. "Even after how we treated you, even after we did not listen." "We came back because it was the right thing to do," Claire replied. "But we came back on our terms this time. That is the difference." In the rebuilt council chamber, now relocated to a neutral world that represented the new, more equal partnership, the new charter was read aloud at a formal session. Ambassador Daniel Cross, who had replaced Claire as Earth's representative, listened as the words echoed through the space. "We, the species of the Galactic Council, acknowledge that cooperation is a privilege, not a right. That help offered is a gift, not an obligation. That no species stands alone and none stands above others. We commit to building a community of mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and genuine partnership. The words were beautiful, but more important than the words were the actions that followed. The council kept its promises. They paid fairly for human work. They treated humans with respect. They never again took humanity for granted, and humanity, for its part, remained engaged but watchful. They helped rebuild civilization, but they never forgot the lesson they had taught. Some gifts can be taken away. Some patience has limits, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone learn from their mistakes. Claire Bennett retired for good after the Haven Memorial Ceremony. She returned to Earth and spent her remaining years writing about the events she had witnessed. Her book, titled simply, "The Price of Taking Things for Granted," became required reading for diplomats across the galaxy. On the final page, she wrote, "The humans departed quietly, leaving the council to face the consequences of their choices. And in the suffering that followed, both sides learned lessons that should never be forgotten. The council learned that help must be appreciated, not expected. And humanity learned that sometimes the hardest act of friendship is stepping back and letting those you care about fail, so they can learn to stand on their own." The galaxy remembered, and it was better for it.